So we talk a lot on this show about how college is not always the right fit for many of us with ADHD, that whole traditional path. But what about the times when it is? Sometimes college is the answer, even if we go about it on a different timeline or on a different path than most people do. After spending a lot of years building a career in the financial industry, our guest today made the bold decision to return to school and pursue an MBA, not just to further his own knowledge, but to empower others and to help them better understand the world around them. My name's Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And this is Fuck the Plan. Please join us in welcoming our dear friend and guest today, Nick Pavao. Nick, hello. Give us a little idea of yourself and your path at this point.
Well, howdy, y'all. I mean, me and my path, Jesus.
Yeah, like kind of your career path.
In high school with I affectionately call a quarter-life crisis, when I realized that everything that I had been studying, for a high school perspective, of course, was culinary arts. And that I actually worked in a kitchen, and I realized I fucking hate this. And I 100% don't want to do this as a career because this is a hobby. It's supposed to be fun, not grueling and painful and emotionally abusive and all that fun jazz.
Oh, yeah.
So
I had a really similar...
I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Oh, man, I had a similar experience to you in the culinary world. I'll put it that way. It's like I love cooking, but I don't like 12-hour shifts on my feet nights and weekends every day for the rest of my life. And once I got a taste of the good life, the cushy job, I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. So I mean, at that point, I was naive growing up. I didn't have a lot of guidance with school and whatnot. I had an ADHD diagnosis, but the family didn't exactly know how do you maximize that. Schools didn't really know at that point. It was when I was that first wave of kids that were really starting to get like ADHD diagnoses in school, and Ritalin and Adderall pills flying around like confetti.
Right.
So I just kind of had to trailblaze and figure it out on my own. Let's see. I mean, I had already been accepted to a university, Johnson and Wales, at that point, and I happened to. It was for me. It was more of a chance of fate. I was in my senior year, and I got called into the guidance office because one of the classes I had taken up, a culinary course, was dropped. It was canceled for that semester. So like, you have to pick something else. And here I am without understanding what I'm going to do with my life. I don't know what I'm doing. It's the senior year. I haven't done anything. I have to figure this out. I picked an economics course because I liked the teacher. Pretty much the only reason why. It's like, I like Mr. Calandra. He's going to be a fun class at least, and I can get through, and I'll figure out my life path from there.
I love that.
Yeah, and went to the class. It was fun. It was interesting. And then I happened to, he was out sick one day, and we watched a Susie Orman presentation on, rolled in one of those TVs in the cart, old-fashioned style, and I was completely enamored. I was like, oh my God, you can study money. This is so cool.
Yeah.
So I literally rushed over, researched what do I do at school to do this, and switched my major to finance.
Right.
School and learning in general was always a tough thing for me. I didn't realize that I enjoyed school and learning until, I'm going to say, my junior year of high school.
Right.
Just because learning disabilities, I struggled with school quite a bit. My brain didn't click, so to speak, until about the second half of my sixth grade. So up until that point, I just hated it. And then I got to this point where I love learning. So for me, going into college was interesting. It was fascinating. It was opening up all these different concepts in the world that I had no knowledge of that were just so cool. I got to peek behind the curtain.
Did any of that have to do with the way you were learning? Because I find that a lot of us with ADHD have sort of this difficulty with learning because there's really only one way of teaching a lot of times in middle school and high school. And then as you get towards the end of high school and into college, you realize, hey, there's other ways of putting this information into my brain that actually work for me.
To a degree. When I was going through most of my primary schools and whatnot, I was in special ed classes. I had an IEP, so I had resource teachers that I worked with. And that continued until about that second half of sixth grade, when the resource teacher's like, you're doing really well to the point where there's nothing that I can do to help you learning because you're beginning to learn on your own. So, but up until that point, I always had special ed classes. I was the kid in grade school where the teacher would come and take like 6 of us out and like do special lesson planning and all that fun jazz. And then in 6th grade for me, I was starting to read novels, like adult level reading novels,
Hmm.
and that's what really kind of got my brain kicking and interested. Um, in retrospect, if I look back on it, once I discovered that learning is fun, and for me it was the reading aspect of it. I enjoyed reading, and as I'm sure you guys know, as you progress in school, the higher you get up in the grades, the more reading comprehension becomes important, at least in the traditional
Hmm.
schooling model,
Right.
using just textbooks and here's the reading, here's the chapters, you got to do this stuff. Uh, so for me, it was like, okay, cool. I just discovered that I like reading. I'm pretty good at it, and now I can utilize the skill to advance myself in my education. So it
Very
just
cool.
kind of worked out well for me in the environment that I was in. Because I mean, having been in teaching in a high school, I did that for a year. The
Right.
learning environment is actually quite different than when we went to school.
Mm.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of changes, from then
It
until
is.
now. Is that, do you think that has to do with, more awareness of how different learning styles are, or is this just kind of a natural progression of the education process? Like, how does that
Or is
evolve
it
from,
technology?
yeah, I'm wondering how that evolves.
Technology aids the process, to my understanding. Now, keep in mind, I was a long-term substitute teacher in a high school for 1 year. So
Mm.
I'm not speaking with any authority on the matter. My experience is that studying like educational psychology and looking at it, uh, this is a natural evolution of we're going to study this topic and we're going to figure out what are better ways of teaching and then
Hmm.
go with that. So when we were in school, we read textbooks.
Right.
Everyone had their books. You had to go to your locker and grab them, all that fun jazz. And it was okay. We're going to read through the chapter. We're going to answer chapter questions. We're going to have activities based on this text-based learning.
And we're going to pray
And
that those textbooks are less than 35 years old.
oh, there's that too. Uh,
Yeah.
and then when I was in the school, I was teaching at a performing arts school, so it had a more creative bend to it. But even then, the curriculums weren't textbook based.
Right.
We didn't have texts that a client, Jesus, that a student would use like we used to.
Right.
Uh, so it was all I forgot the specific term, but it was basically a learning style where we're studying a phenomena. So you have your education standards.
Hmm.
This is what the state expects you to be able to learn and do at this
Common
grade level.
Core or whatever they call it.
Say what?
The Common Core bullshit or whatever they call it.
Well, Common Core was a methodology of trying to go towards this type of learning, but also in a non-traditional fashion. Um,
Gotcha.
Common Core got a lot of really bad heat by a bunch of really ignorant people, and in and of itself, it is not a bad thing. It is promoting different ways of learning, and in truth be told, it acknowledges that you can learn how to do things many different ways.
That's not a bad thing.
So
I don't
No,
think.
not at
many
all.
roads lead to Rome. You get the end result, but my brain does it differently than yours, and this is a way that you can do that, and you don't have to be stuck in this one way of doing things,
That's
which was
very cool.
interesting. I mean, I didn't teach in a common core school,
Yeah.
but what we used it evidence-based. We used a phenomena-based educational method, which is becoming the de facto standard uh, in colleges and at the high school level, where we use this investigative approach where we're slowly revealing details and pieces of the puzzle as students are investigating what is this thing. So
Right.
for example, I was teaching middle school science, and the school was using open scied, which is the only free open source curriculum that is like approved by the state to use. Like a lot of states use it, and you have this anchoring phenomena that occurs, and then you're literally each lesson plan is designed to uncover another piece of this puzzle that students are supposed to be curious about and want to learn about and all that fun jazz. I mean, it's an interesting concept.
I love that. And if you think about it, like, So with me and my brain, I won't speak for everybody with ADHD, but I know a lot of us do. Um, you guys ever you watch certain TV shows like I not to bring it to a pop culture thing, but Breaking Bad, for example. Have you guys seen Breaking Bad?
Oh yeah.
All right. So what they are very good at doing, Vince Gilligan specifically, but what the show is very good at doing is revealing the right piece of information at the right time, not only to the viewer, but to the people in the show, the characters, right?
Yeah.
And it creates something that keeps your interest flowing a certain way. So it's not just they're dumping all of the information on you all at once and say, "Hey, absorb as much of this shit as you can. There's a test next week." They say, "All right, here's a teaser of what the end goal is, right? Here's an idea, a little bit of foreshadowing here, which is going to pique your interest. And then we're going to reveal little bits of information along the way to keep that interest because it engages that part of your brain that wants to know more, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just say, here's a bunch of text, like when we were all studying for our financial industry exams. Here's a book with a list of laws in it. Memorize them. There's a test in 6 weeks. So I really like that idea. And it's funny because to me, that's kind of how our lives work, right? Like we have some idea of where we want to go with our life. If you're lucky, you have a concrete idea of it. And you start working little by little and uncovering this piece of information. So I love that we're into the education piece. So I want to connect for our listeners here. So we started off talking, you were getting interested in finance and learning about money. And now fast forward all these years and you're a long-term high school substitute teacher and pursuing college. So I want to kind of step back to how we all know each other and where that financial industry thing kind of shifted into education. So firstly, to give an idea, Cass and I worked together, and Nick was also one of the advisors who worked with us when we were financial advisors at a regional bank investment division, because we don't like to get too specific. So Nick is a very close friend of ours. Funny enough, I performed Nick's wedding ceremony, so I was the officiant for that one. It was very classy, and I'll leave it at that.
It was very classy at Texas Roadhouse.
It was, yes. So I have to just kind of sidetrack us for a second here, Nick, because all the time I tell people, "Oh yeah, you play that 2 truths and a lie game, or what's a fun fact about you kind of game, right?" And one of mine is always that I'm a wedding officiant. And people say, "Oh wow, that's so crazy." And I say, "Yeah, I've done about 5 weddings, and my absolute favorite wedding that I've done is the gay wedding at the Texas Roadhouse." And people love that. And it really is my favorite because like what other person finds themselves performing a gay wedding at a Texas Roadhouse? And like nobody. And like that's such a funny fucking thing, I think. And I mean, it's endearing to me because like I look at it as like you guys loved each other so much. You wanted to be at Texas Roadhouse. It didn't matter. You just needed to get married to each other. And you didn't care about like, oh, maybe one day we'll have the nice big ceremony. You guys are like, you know what? It's important to us to be married. Let's go to a restaurant, have a nice steak, and get married, buddy.
A Texas Roadhouse, not just any restaurant.
Oh no, a Texas Roadhouse.
It helped that we were poor at the time, so
well, yeah, I think we all
were
a
deciding factor.
Yeah, which is kind of funny how once the 3 of us got out of the financial industry, our finances started, getting a little better. And I mean, I know I'm still in the financial business in a way. I'm not a financial advisor.
I'm sorry,
I still
did you
have
say our finances started to get better?
In a way, I mean.
Funny.
Yeah, you're getting there, Cass. You're getting there. Don't worry. I know you got 19, side gigs, but eventually they'll all become one main gig. So, I think, I'm getting really sidetracked here now. But anyways, to back up to, we all knew each other from being financial advisors, working in this, in this bank together, right? So at some point you were working there and you realized that you didn't want to do that same path anymore, and you decided you wanted to go into education and pursue your MBA. So what was there a defining factor or some sort of moment where you realized like this isn't exactly what I want to be doing? Because you were really interested in learning about money and economics in college, and then you did that for many years, and then there was a shift. So I'm curious to like what the circumstances were that brought that about.
Fun fact is I still work in finance. I'm a regional consultant for a large insurance company. I train and teach advisors in the field how to effectively run their business, how to use financial planning in this case to make connections with clients and do meaningful work with them. So I still work in finance. I stepped out into education. That was problematic in a number of different ways. I don't want to
Hmm.
trash the school I worked for, but it was a very, what's a nicer way of saying toxic?
Toxic. I think you
Okay.
should just call
It
people
was
out
it
on their
was kind of a
bullshit.
toxic environment. It was tumultuous. It was a pain in the ass. I mean, don't get me wrong. You are right. Where I had this come to Jesus moment in the finance industry, where I was like, this is not sustainable based on me and my personality.
Yeah.
I mean, I
And
worked my way up.
just to interject for a moment for the
Yes.
audience, I'm not sure that a lot of folks know this, but a financial advisor in the sense of the financial industry is a salesperson, to be blunt
More
about
or
it.
less, yeah.
So yes, you are helping clients with their financial futures, but your job is to create revenue for the company by doing that, right? So we're not making
And
bad
ideally create revenue for
recommendations,
themselves. A lot of
but
financial advisors are independent business owners.
they
So,
are. Yeah.
something I teach my advisors about is that, yes, it's good to, keep and hold true to the idea that I want to help people and I want them to have better financial lives. But at the end of the day, you do need to sell things because you need to make a salary so that way you can keep helping
Right.
people. It's the nature of the beast.
It
Uh,
is. And I felt like I really feel like the sales side of it is very different from the training, coaching, operational side of being in the
just a
financial
smidge.
industry. So
And yeah,
teaching people these concepts, I just want to make sure the audience understands that this is a very, very different type of role within the industry. It's not like you're
Yes.
going from like line cook to prep cook in a kitchen, to go back to what we were
This is
talking
well,
about, you know.
to a degree, you could consider it a linear progression because I would not be able to do what I do now had I not gone through all
Right.
those
You have to
years
have the
working in
experience.
banking, working in investments, working as a relationship manager, then actually going and being an actual financial advisor and then a financial planner. Like I needed to go through that progression in order to build up the body of knowledge and experience that I have, which I can then teach and guide people.
Right.
Just like most things in life, like you're not gonna come fresh out of college, be like, all right, I'm going to teach you stuff now. It's like, you just learned that 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
How can you effectively teach that? That is not how
Exactly.
that works, sweetie. But yeah, so I mean, for me, my biggest turning point was realizing that I did not want to do frontline sales anymore.
Yeah.
I can do it. I'm quite good at it. It is exhausting.
Oh,
It does not jive with how my brain works. And
it's
actually,
high
surprisingly enough,
stress.
it fits ADHD quite well just because you have these spurts of hyper focused attention you're on when you're in a sales meeting, and then you can you come out of that meeting and then you can just kind of blob out for a little while and let your brain recharge.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are other aspects of my personality that do not jive in that particular fashion, and that's the part that won out. That and the income instability really fucking sucked. So I reached this point where I loved helping people. For me, that was my biggest draw of it being in finance. Is I got to help people in a meaningful way, especially just because finance is just so incredibly complicated and intimidating in
Right.
this country. So I was doing some meaningful work, and that was satisfying for me. But it was not sustainable because I'm not doing 70, 80-hour work weeks where I need to be social all the time because I am not inherently an extroverted personality. I've trained myself how to do it. I can turn myself on when necessary to be an extrovert and be the life of the party and all that fun jazz. But that is exhausting. It drains my
Right.
batteries so much faster. So that became unsustainable. And I'm like, cool, I just spent like nearly 10 years of my life doing this. And what I thought was my end goal wasn't my end goal because that
Yeah.
shit ain't just gonna fucking work. Sorry.
Yep.
Uh, so at that point,
Was there
I
like a
mean, we had this
burnout or like a stress
little
moment where you had that
outbreak called
realization?
COVID. So that kind of put a pause on everything, which gave me some time to breathe in my career. And then I came back into the finance industry once people started hiring again. That's where we all worked together at that regional
Right.
bank, uh, doing finance again. And it was nice. I was able to draw upon a lot of experience. Uh, and then make some transitions. I knew I didn't want to be in sales still, the entire time I was there,
Right.
didn't want to be in sales. This was a stepping
You
stone.
you very openly talked about that with us even when we were first starting on that team. I remember, even though you were if not the best, one of the best salespeople on that team,
Hmm.
you also were kind of like a teacher. Like there were so many concepts. I was a little baby working in there. I think I was 24, 25. I didn't know a
I
lot of
always
these
forget
big
how much
concepts.
younger you are than I am.
Yeah. I just a baby. But so with those concepts, I was unfamiliar with because I didn't have any real life experience with these
Yeah.
levels of insurance and things because I hadn't had to yet. And our boss wasn't exactly teaching them to us in a productive way.
Fun
I
guy,
think the laughter
but
speaks for itself. And Nick would always come in and be like, "Hey, I'm going to take a half hour out of my day. Come over here and let me teach you about, this high level health insurance caveat and
Hmm.
things that we can actually use." And he would always phrase it in the not sleazy way of like, this will sound real good and they'll buy this shit from you. It was always a, let me tell you how this can actually help people.
Yeah.
And so even then, you always struck me as much more of a natural teacher and much more of a natural, almost nurturer in a way than
Yes, I'm a
your
total
typical
daddy. I know.
salesperson.
The
Yep.
gray help, but and you're right. I mean, throughout most of my career, and it's funny because these are talking points I had when I was getting this past job. Uh, I've always incorporated learning and education. This is partly because, as I had mentioned previously, I discovered a love of learning and a love of finding out how things work. So that's just really cool for me. I get all nerdy about it. And then I coupled that with, through my own professional career, realizing that if I educate people on the concepts that we're talking about, like when I was a planner in the field, I would always educate my clients. I would make sure that they understand not just what we are doing, but why we are doing it, just because I found that educated people who are more informed are better clients.
yeah,
It's not so much of an uphill battle with different concepts. We can work at a higher level. It's just all around, it just works.
yeah.
I mean, even at
I'm a
my
big
time with
believer.
Merrill Lynch, I was training people on how do you pass your securities exams. Let's share best practices. I'm a collaborative learning type person, where it's just, for me, it's the most effective way at being successful. Is everyone share and pool your knowledge. So I did that a lot, and then at this bank, I did the same thing. I was, at the time, I was the only, like, I was a tenured sales and financial planning person when they hired me, and I was the only one on the team that actually had previous experience as a financial advisor or planner.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I was the fifth person. Yeah, I was the fifth person they hired on that team. It was a team of three. One guy got hired, I think it was like a week or two before I did,
Yeah.
and
I
he
think
had
that
no
was
previous experience.
I
Say
think that
what?
was me.
No, no, I
Really?
forgot his name. He sat
He's
right next to you.
one of the other
Oh,
guys.
my work husband. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
Yep.
that's who it was. But none of them had previous sales experience. And here I am. I'm coming in with a decade of sales experience at this point and finance experience. So yeah, I was operating at a much higher level than most of the team. So I could sit there and I could just tell you, how do these things work? Here's how we position it. I've always focused myself on communication and psychology as like a side discipline throughout my career, because as I'm sure you know, with ADHD, you tend to have not necessarily deficiencies, but delays in social emotional learning compared to your peers. It's a
Yeah.
common issue that ADHD people have. So for me, I was like, I'm going to study the fuck out of this, and then I won't have that deficiency as much.
Yeah, man,
So,
I got to interrupt you there for a second because, like,
please.
this hits on something that all the time we see as a stigma associated with, especially children with ADHD and learning and education, right? Like, a lot of times, and I'm sure you guys have similar experience, when I was young, in middle school, high school, was identified as someone who wouldn't apply themselves to learn, who didn't want to
Mhm.
do the work, and who didn't seem like he cared about school and learning. But in reality, we fucking love to learn things. One of the things that I say all the damn time is, hey, it's 2025. Google exists. There is no reason not to know shit anymore, right? You can go in 10 seconds on your phone and learn the answer to whatever question you have in your brain. There's no need for disinformation, misinformation, or just missing information anymore.
Well, there's
And
no
it's,
good rule, things not.
Yeah.
There's plenty
it's
of needs, unfortunately. They're just all dastardly.
yes, yes. There's a lot out there, but my point is that we want to learn and know these things, but we need to do it in ways that work for our brains, or we need to have that interest tied to it for wanting to learn for it to work for us. And to me, it's just, I have to call out what a shame it is that a lot of kids with ADHD are pigeonholed as kids who don't want to or can't apply themselves to learn, when in reality, we really do love to learn how things work and all of the inner details of them. We just have to get that information in a way that works with our brains.
I agree. And like most complicated issues in society, this one is multifaceted. I mean, from educators that I've known, they all have a passion for teaching and learning. The problem for, like, on that side of the equation is just capacity. Yeah, you're going to have a couple of teachers that are just assholes, that are just they're jaded. They're in this cushy job that they're going to go. I've met maybe one or two of them at the end of their career, but like, teaching doesn't lend itself to that mentality. But you also have an issue, I'll say this, for educators, is a capacity issue. You only have so much time and energy. You are certainly well underpaid for the amount of effort you're expected to bring to bear. Parents are a huge pain in the ass, just because it's not like when we were kids. If I went to school and my teacher called my mother and said Nick was doing X, Y, and Z, mom's like, why the fuck were you doing that in school? My mother would not have fought with the teacher about her little angel could never do that. It must be something else. No, what the fuck were you doing? And that's not a mentality that's pervasive today. And I'm going to say that not to try not to get off on too much of a tangent, I'll say that that's just an extreme response to how the current generation of parents, which are mostly millennials now, that's just the pendulum swinging the other way of how they were raised. So it's just an opposite. I don't want to call it an extreme reaction, but it's an opposite, like, out there reaction of like the antithesis of what they were raised doing. So
an
overcorrection
for it. Yeah.
Huh?
An overcorrection almost.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect term. It's an overcorrection, and it's understandable. It's human. It's not the right thing to do, but whatever. So you have this ability where you have teachers that genuinely want to. One thing I will say, it's toxic as annoying as that teaching experience was. Every single teacher that I encountered had a passion for learning and wanting to teach whatever it is that they want. And these people were fucking smart.
Yeah.
Like, growing up, I didn't think of my teachers as like overly intelligent people. And then I stepped in just like, oh, not only do you have to have an expertise in the subject that you're teaching, you also now have to have a dual discipline in the science and art of education itself.
Right.
Which is its own discipline. So you have these dual discipline people everywhere you go, and they're really damn good at it. They really, really are. And that it was just, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the support, and they don't have the resources. A second part of it, kids, especially because we're all kind of like this when we're teenagers. There are other things you want to do besides learning.
Right.
And I will say is that while it would be nice to have a system that was better suited to the educational needs of a population, there's also some self-responsibility there. At the end of the day, you are the one with ADHD. You are the one with this particular condition. While it is nice if society steps it the fuck up and helps out, sadly, they're not obligated to. It is what it is. So for people with ADHD, it's not enough to be like, oh, this is so hard, I want to learn more, but I can't because of this. No, you can. You have to decide that you're going to put the effort in to figure it the fuck out on your own. Because that's kind of what I ended up doing, is I had to figure it out on my own. There weren't anywhere near as many resources throughout my entire educational career. And that means, grade school, middle school, high school, even into college, where there was this big support network for learning disabilities, for people with different learning styles. You were expected to you're going to need to figure this out. This is part of your life journey, is figuring out how do you still function in society even if society is not specifically catering toward you.
Right. And that kind of leads into one of the questions we had because, now you're back in school, you're pursuing an MBA. So we oftentimes have talked about, yes, it's difficult, but that doesn't excuse you from putting in the work. So
Correct.
what are some of the things that you've used or how have you adapted to that, to using those learning strategies to stay focused and organized and successful in your studies when you do actually have the passion for it?
So it's difficult. And I'm going to say that with this caveat. So yes, I just applied for my MBA program. I'm hoping to hear back in a month or two if I can get that started. Up until that point, however, there was a brief time where I was going to pivot myself into education away from finance. And I was taking classes towards that. So I've taken a number of different just basic bachelor level, college level courses. This was based in psychology, education. It was some science courses, stuff that was not my inherent professional wheelhouse. It was quite difficult because not only did I have to, after, God, I mean, I graduated in 2009 from my original degree, so I haven't been in classes in a while. So having to relearn and re-remember basically how to function as a student in a classroom environment, in addition to balancing that with my everything else going on in life, it was something that I did struggle with a bit.
Yeah.
I didn't have a good system of, okay, it's time to sit down and do your homework, make sure you do the reading and all that fun jazz. So that was something I was difficult with. And it was made more difficult because I was doing things out of my wheelhouse. What I'm hoping for the MBA program is because I'm a 17-year of experience in business. So none of these are supposed to be new concepts to me. So I'm hoping it's not going to be as much of a lift when it comes to doing the schoolwork now. I mean, it's still going to be difficult. It's still graduate level courses here. Like I'm not expecting a cakewalk through this.
Yeah.
But it's going to be much more aggressive management of my calendar and making sure that I'm allocating time. I mean, one of the benefits is my husband's also going to school for radiography, so we're hopefully going to be in school at the same time. So it'll be easy to be like, all right, hey, cool, we're going to do the next 2 hours on the weekend, and we're just going to do catch up on schoolwork. So it'll be kind of like that. I always forget the damn term, and this is actually something that really works for ADHD people, is I'm going to do my thing and you're going to do your thing, but we're going to do that close together, because just being in the environment where you're doing your thing or just having you there for some reason is a positive modulating presence.
Yes, like body doubling.
Yes.
People call that a lot. Yes.
So that works really well for me as an ADHD team. So, like, for example, there'd be times just like, I'm going to go cook breakfast, but I need you just to stand in the kitchen with me because I'm not functioning in the morning. Morning's been really difficult for me. Come here, kitty.
Oh, God, we love a good cat on this show. Yes.
Hi, bud.
Which one is it?
This is Annika.
Oh, hi, Annika. She's gotten so big.
Picture.
I feel like it's a while since I've seen her, but yeah.
She's really good at tolerating people hold her.
Look at that.
Oh, well,
she's trying to escape right now, but I'm making her pay her dues because I feed you.
It's like the second I said that, she went, no, I'm not.
Yeah. She's not what we call a picked up kitty. She's an on the ground kitty.
Is more. She's the big fluffy one.
Oh, that's great.
But so, that body doubling was very helpful. I found too, because for my particular type of ADHD, I have a lot of audio distraction. When I got my adult diagnosis, that was one of the things in the reports. I scored really low with audio distraction, which was nice because it's something that I've always experienced, but never really put words to. And now I did. So now I have I can hack that where I have a playlist on YouTube of background tones, songs, whatever the hell it is, just nothing with lyrics that I can just play to drown out that thing and allow my brain to focus.
Dude, I'm totally with you on that. I do that all the time when I'm working. Either, funny enough, stuff without lyrics, or I've really gotten into like a handful of Japanese like pop rock bands because they sing in Japanese, and it's like, dude, I have to put a link, you know what I mean? But like, it's something in another language, or like a good friend of mine, the other guitar player for my band, his wife is from Brazil, and they introduced me to this band called Baiana System, and they're obviously singing in Portuguese, and so it's just like nice, like rhythmic, low tone kind of music with non-English language lyrics,
because
the English
it doesn't become distracting.
Exactly, and that's so awesome.
I was reading an article about that. It's interesting. because I'll
You
have
strike me as
things.
you strike me as someone who's very self-aware of these things, and like obviously that's earned, right? Like that doesn't just happen. We all kind
Yeah.
of get to this point of self-awareness, but like how important is that, like learning about yourself and your own ways of working? How has that shaped things?
It was a critical step to the point where everyone, regardless of your neurodiversity, whatever flavor brain you have, everyone should be working with that self-discovery, introspection. It's something that I find is rather lacking in society today. We have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
distractions. We have a lot of dopamine hits wherever we go. I mean, I can open my phone and scroll TikTok, and then it's like, oh, it's been an hour, and I'm
Yeah.
scrolling videos. And there are so many ways that we can distract ourselves from knowing yourself because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
like
not
who
easy.
likes looking at their flaws and looking at their weaknesses. No one does. And
Especially when there's
society,
especially when there's a million things pulling you externally for
Mhm.
attention, right? They're
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is fun, this is distracting, this is numbing, this is not forcing you to ask yourself hard questions. Watch this
Yeah.
show instead.
So, but knowing yourself, taking that time to get introspective, reflect, be candid with yourself. It's uncomfortable. It's difficult at first. Something that I've kind of just happened to teach myself how to do it. I thank my crippling anxiety for that. Um,
I was going to ask if
but
there was a
still very
catalyst.
useful. It was one of the things I talk with my therapist about. Is I always make sure, like, okay, we're a new therapy person. Okay, cool. So here's me in a nutshell, and I'll just word vomit all of these things because, I operate at a much higher level than your average psych patient for therapy because I've done it before. I've studied psychology. I understand all the cognitive behavioral therapies that you're supposed to do. I'm already at a point where I can easily and quickly be candid and self-reflect on situations. So it has become a very important tool for personal growth. And at the end of the day, you're stuck with yourself. Like, lie to whoever you want. Don't lie to
Yeah.
yourself. That's kind of silly. It's funny because I like one of my hobbies. I like to read tarot cards, and when I do like a consult with someone, I always tell them, it's like, okay, you don't have to tell me, but you have to tell yourself. Like, you have to be totally candid with yourself,
Yeah.
because if we're looking for metaphysical guidance, whatever it is like you're not lying to these things. You're not
Yeah.
lying to yourself. It's kind of a fool's errand.
Yeah.
And that being said, I know certain people who are really good at lying to themselves, uh, which
Yeah.
is
I
a
mean,
skill in and of itself. But still,
it gets really easy these days. You know what I mean? It's hard to have those difficult discussions with yourself and about yourself when there's so many things in the world meant to force you to do the opposite or encourage you to do the opposite, pull your
I think
attention away.
I think that lying to yourself is actually the ultimate thing that tries to pull you away.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very good tool of distraction in and of itself that comes internally. It's not an external force trying to get you to stop focusing on the important stuff. It's the internal version of a game on your phone.
Yeah.
Like,
to
you
a
lie to
degree, yeah.
yourself and it's
Even if it's not the direct thing, it's what motivates you. I really don't want to look at it myself because it's painful and uncomfortable. My brain is going to actively, because your brain is really good at actively trying to negate cognitive dissonance, that psychological pain that you
Yeah.
have for situations. So if you're in a situation where you are not very good at self-reflection, you're not at all, and you're the toxic person in relationships, you're the problematic person, but no one ever sees themselves as the villain. You're going to find all of these reasons all of a sudden to not do the work that you need to do, which is look at yourself in the mirror with a cold, hard eye, because it's uncomfortable. So if anything, whether or not it's the activity, it is certainly the motivation to seek out distracting activities.
Yeah. And it's difficult to do that, but it's also the path to progress, right? Like
100%.
people all the time have these crises of like, why am I stuck? Why can't I do this? Everybody is against me. And I think if you don't have that realization of, hey, this is coming from inside, this is coming from in here in me, you're always looking to find some reason to blame it on. Like, oh, well, I can't do it because of this, or I can't do it because of that. But people, I think, not often enough do people realize that they are the problem, myself included. It took me way too long to realize I'm the fucking problem in my life. And that's the only problem that I have 100% control over fixing. And, I say 100% control. I know there's certain inalienable qualities, but at the same time, if I am the thing that I am able to control more often than not, why don't I start with fixing these inherent problems? And then if other problems still exist, they're still going to exist and we'll still have to figure it out. But I've got to keep my side of the street clean, so to speak. I've got to take care of the things I can control.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The situation, society, unless you're born wealthy or privileged, the deck is certainly stacked against you. There's no denying that. Politics aside, from an economic standpoint, that's just what it is.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things that you cannot directly control that are going to affect you, that you don't have a say in the matter. However, that being said, you're right. And there is a lot you can do. Like, I can't control the circumstances around, but I can control how I react to those circumstances.
That's right.
I've been in plenty of times in my life where I've had two options and they both fucking sucked. And I have to pick whichever one is the lesser of two evils. As much as for some reason we have aversion to that notion in society, but hey, that's life. And that's been the human existence since the fucking beginning. So you whining about, oh, it doesn't have to be the lesser of two evils. It's like, get with the fucking program.
Yeah.
You are not going to rewrite humanity's existence and experience just because you don't like the fact that this is reality. Mm-hmm. Life is not a video game where you can always just figure out what the best options are and then always have to be able to do that. That's not how this works.
Yeah.
So all of that being said, yes, you do need to focus on yourself to a degree. Recognizing, however, that you can do a lot of self-work. You can do a lot of be prepared, be wise, be open, experience, all that fun jazz, and everything can still work against you. Life is not inherently fair. It never has been. So just make peace with that and then move on, because that's just what it is.
It is what it is.
For ADHD people specifically, society is not geared towards us. We were looked at as aberrations for so long, and we still are. There are people who are, from both sides of this equation, who are, we should embrace ADHD and not, medicate. We're over medicating everybody. This is who you are. You should celebrate. It's like, yeah, that's great, but I still have to function in society. So I could be all this self-celebration I want. I still have to go to work every day, and I still have to interface with society that is not designed for my brain. And that's just how it is. So I have to suck it up, and I can't just be sitting here worried about myself and like, oh, the injustice of it all. You can complain about the injustice, but you still have to figure out how to function. And then you have the flip side where people don't care. They think it's made up. I mean, you have a lot of this anti-science motion and anti-intellectualism where people's like, oh, it's just made up. You just got to slap the kid around. I mean, South Park did a funny episode about that.
Yes.
It's like, oh, it's like, sit down and shut up. And the kid just starts working. That's funny. But it's also shitty because that's not how that works. And people who are proponents of this idea clearly have no fucking clue what they're talking about. And that's just a great way to alienate people and make them produce at the lowest possible level. So grow the fuck up. I don't know what to tell you. That's not reality either.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm totally with you on that one. And I think so, just since we're running up against time here and we have another guest coming on, I do just want to get a last word from you, Nick. And I think you kind of touched on a lot of this. I can imagine what you might hint at, but people, especially those with ADHD who are not sure whether school, education, college are the right path for them, what would you suggest to them? What advice would you give to them, or how would you encourage them? Maybe it's decision making, maybe it's something else, but what would you say to someone who's not really sure, but they're curious?
All right. So it is not enough to be ADHD is my one consideration as to whether or not I should go to school. Humans are multifaceted, complex creatures where ADHD absolutely is a pervasive, and it touches every area of your life that needs to be considered, but it is not the only factor to consider when it comes to, am I going to go to school or not? So basically, I don't want someone to be like, oh, I didn't go to college because I have ADHD and that's not how college isn't designed for me. No, that's bullshit. What I will say is when it comes to deciding what you should do, a little bit of wisdom I used to try to tell the students I have is like, look, up until the point when you graduate high school, there have been other people who have been responsible for teaching you and educating you. When you graduate, you become an adult. The expectation, the world is still going to expect you to educate and learn and understand how things work, and the world is under no obligation to do that for you anymore. It's going to expect you to still do that. You now become responsible for your own education and the quality of that education. I can go watch conspiracy videos all day and be like, oh, I'm educating myself. No, you're not. You're feeding yourself bullshit, and it's useless, and it's not going to be very helpful. And so when it comes to deciding, am I going to go to school, would learning what that school has to teach you be a help or a hindrance in your life? This is where that aggressive honesty and candor is going to be necessary, because your emotions can say one thing, but logic is what's going to say the right thing at this point. Right. Yes, it's going to help you. Now, that being said, this idea that we were all raised with of go to school, get a job, you're fine is bullshit. And we're seeing that with the millennial generation as everyone's just constantly struggling with all this college debt and bullshit. So there are many ways of learning. Trade schools are phenomenal. Go learn a trade. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Go learn a specialized skill set. Delay going to college. You don't have to go to college right out of high school. You can go and work in an area that you find interesting and then figure out what kind of learning do I need to do. At the end of the day, you are responsible for your own learning, and you are responsible to pursue that to the betterment of yourself and society. And there's no particular linear path. There is nothing wrong with waiting till you are 25 to go to school. I don't care if you're going to be with a bunch of freshmen that are 18 years old. Yes, they're annoying, but 18-year-olds are just annoying in general. That's going to get worse with time, so get it over now while you can.
Yeah. I think that's an awesome observation, and probably a good place to put a pin in that one is to think and critically think for yourself as far as what is going to be best for you. So that being said, Nick, it has been really awesome to chat with you and have you on. I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time out and joining us.
My pleasure.
Again, everybody, my name is Aaron.
My name's Cass.
And this has been Fuck the Plan.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick. Thank you.
I couldn't help myself.